In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how we can create a 3-node cluster with both Kubernetes and KubeSphere installed. So in this cluster, one of the nodes will be the master, with the other 2 nodes serving as the worker. And the platform I'm going to use is GCP. And as you can see, I have listed the detailed steps in this tutorial and some commands that I will be using. So let's get started. So first, you need to have a Google account, which is quite obvious. You need to create a project on the Google platform. As you can see, I have already created a project which is called KubeSphere. So from the navigation bar, you go to VM instances to create 3 instances, as I said. So click Create. So for the name of the first instance, let's just set it to master. So this is our master node. And for the region and zone, you don't need to change it. Just use the default value. And for machine configuration, I just use the default machine as well, because this demonstration is about the minimal installation of KubeSphere. By the way, you can actually take a look at the documentation of KubeSphere to understand the system requirements of multi-node installation on Linux here. So for the minimal requirements, as you can see, it's 2 cores and 4G for memory. And for our operating system, I will just select Ubuntu and 50 GB for its size. Well, for other settings like security or networking, basically you don't need to set anything for it, because Google will do everything for you automatically. You just need to customize the parameters that you need. So now click Create. Okay, now we can create the other 2 instances using the same way. So this is node 1. Select the operating system. That's the same. Create. And node 2. So when you create an instance, Google will assign both a private and public IP address to the instance. As you can see. So after we have these 3 nodes ready, we can go to the next step, which is about create SSH keys and test the connection between our nodes. So let me explain first why we need to create SSH keys. Later, I will use KubeKey to install both KubeSphere and Kubernetes. KubeKey is a brand new installer developed in Go language, which allows you to install both KubeSphere and Kubernetes at the same time. You can actually also upgrade your cluster using KubeKey. But before I download KubeKey, I need to select a machine as the task box, where I will use KubeKey to create a configuration file for installation. I have to make sure that I can connect to the other two instances from the task box using SSH. So I need to create SSH keys first. For example, I can just create SSH keys on the master node directly. And Google provides you with the command line tool, so you don't need to connect to it from your local machine. Okay. First, make sure you are the root user. So sudo su. As you can see, there's nothing here. So use this command to create a public key and a private key. So press enter directly. This is the path, as you can see. So let's have a look at the keys. So that's the public key. We need to copy this public key and paste it. Now we need to add this public key to all the three nodes, remember, to all the three nodes, including the master node itself. So click it. Edit. Here, paste it to the box here. Delete the unnecessary space here, remember? And click Save. Likewise, we need to add the public key to the other two instances. Before we go to the next step, we can test the connection between these instances using the SSH key we just created. Now we can test the connection between the task box and the other two worker instances. Use this command to test the connection. The IP is the public IP that Google assigns to the instance. So here, copy this IP address. Yes, As you can see, the connection is successful. So go back to the master node. Likewise, test the connection between the task box and node 2. Yes, as you can see, the connection is also successful. Now we can begin to download KubeKey and use KubeKey to create a configuration file. Before that, please take a look at these requirements, node requirements and dependency requirements. As I will install the default Kubernetes version later, which is 1.17.9, I do not need to install all these dependencies. But please pay special attention to these requirements before you download KubeKey. Since this is just a simple demonstration, so I will just download the KubeKey directly. So use this command to download KubeKey, because obviously we have good network connections to GitHub. So the download completed. It's very fast. And let's have a look at the folder. We have KK, and we need to make it executable. Now you can create a configuration file in which you provide the basic information of your instances. You can customize the name of the configuration file and where it is stored. Now I will just use this command to install KubeSphere version 3.0. So KubeKey will automatically create a YAML file. This is the configuration file I just mentioned. So you need to edit this file to provide the basic information of your instances. This is an example here. So let's edit this file. So in this file, you will see different parameters. For the minimal installation, you don't need to add all the parameters. You only need to provide the necessary fields in this file. So for this part, the host part, you need to provide the basic information of your instances, such as the name, that's the host name, and the address. This IP address is the one you use for the connection between the task box and other instances through SSH. So in this case, you can input the public IP address for this field, and internal IP address, that's the private IP address. So for the last part, user and a password, well, Google does not allow you to set a password directly when you create an instance. Well, obviously you can do that manually using the passwd command, but at the same time, you need to make some changes in the sshd config file, which is time consuming. Obviously, I will not do that. I will just use the SSH keys I just created as you can see, there are different options for you to choose. So I just need to add the path of the private key to this file. So first, I will change the host name here. So master, that's master node. Address, that's the public IP address of the master node. Oops, sorry. And internal address, that's the private IP address, like I said. And delete the user and the password field here because we don't need them. We just use the private IP path here. So remember, this path, this is the one where I created my private SSH key. So you need to make sure that this is your path. Maybe you have a different path, so just use your own path here. So likewise, add the information for node 1 and node 2 under the field hosts. I have provided all the information of my instances under the field hosts. So let's continue. For the field etcd, you need to add the name of a node here as the etcd node. For instance, I will just set the master node as the etcd node, and under master, of course, master node here, and worker node, node 1 and node 2. You don't need to change it. And for other fields, you can continue to set them if you want. For example, you can add storage plugins for the cluster. Then you need to set it under the field add-ons. You can have a look at persistent storage configurations, which tells you more information about this part. At the same time, you can also enable pluggable components of KubeSphere to explore more features of it. Like I said, this is just a simple demonstration, so I won't enable all the pluggable components, but the rule is very simple. As you can see, these values, they're false. So if you want to enable a component, just change it to true, and that will do. And now let's just save this file. After we added the config sample file, we can use a command to begin the installation. Here, copy it. So before the installation, KubeKey will check your environment and make sure the time of these 3 nodes is already synchronized. And yes, here. As you can see, the installation will start automatically. Basically, you don't need to do anything now. Just wait, maybe have a cup of coffee or tea, and KubeKey will just do everything for you. The image downloading speed and installation time depend on your network connection and the machine configuration. By the way, I just added 3 nodes to this cluster. You can add more nodes to the cluster if you want, maybe more master nodes. But at the same time, you need to take high availability into consideration, which requires you to configure a load balancer. Okay, as you can see, the installation finishes now. So we can have a look at our pods by running this command. As you can see, all the pods are running. To access the web console of KubeSphere, you need to make sure that the port number 30880, the port number is opened in your security group. In GCP, you need to create firewall rules for the port. By the way, in addition to the console, you may need to use other services. So here are the port requirements for some services in KubeSphere. If you want to use them, please make sure you open relevant ports in your security group. So on Google Cloud Platform, we need to create a firewall rule. So for the name, for example, let's just enter KubeSphere. And we don't need any tag. So we just select all instances in the network, okay? And for the source IP ranges, so for the convenience of demonstration, I will just allow all protocols and ports and click create. Now go back to the previous page. To access the web console, we need to use the IP address of a node and the port number 30880. As the firewall rule I just created applies to all the instances in the cluster, you can use any public IP address of these 3 nodes. For example, I will just use the public IP address of the master node. So copy it, plus the port number. Now for the default account and password, we just use this. Click login. Okay, so that's the dashboard of KubeSphere. Click platform and you can see more detailed information of the entire cluster. They are the 3 nodes I just created in the cluster, and we can see the status of our components. CRDs, So basically that's all for this tutorial. If you want to know more about the installation of KubeSphere, such as high availability configurations, persistent storage configurations, you can have a look at those documents. Thank you for watching and see you in the next tutorial.